This is the RFR Mandalorian After Show.
All right, we certainly don't want to waste any time. Let's get to it. Mandalorian After Show from Rebel Force Radio, talking about Chapter 6. 2 more left after this. But man, what an episode. I know some of you, we saw the emails, we took the phone calls. Some of you were let down by last week's episode. And I'm still trying to figure out why, but I'm just going to take your word for it. But this week, I just think they delivered big time. Big time. I think it had a little bit of everything. We'll get down in the weeds of this episode this week by taking your phone calls and also talking to our esteemed guests. Starting, of course, with, as always, my good friend and yours from Chicago, Jimmy Mack.
Hey, Jason. Hey, Star Wars fans. Hey, Mando Maniacs. Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. Wow.
Oh, by the way, yeah? Someone said that last week you were sort of invoking a Hulk Hogan vibe with Mando Maniacs, brother, right?
Yeah. All right. Well,
and they're thinking that it's probably a little more appropriate for a Macho Man Randy Savage. Mando Maniacs.
No. I disagree because the Hulkster had the Hulkamaniacs. And we're bringing back the Mando Maniacs, brother. We'll be hanging and banging down at the bottom of the seas of Camino. And all right, listen. Come on. I didn't know I had to do Hulk Hogan. I need a warm-up. I have to do the Hulk Hogan warm-up.
How do you do? What is that?
So it's a lot of posing. It's more of a physical experience than an actual vocal one. But enough of old school WWF. We're here to talk on the RFR Mandalorian After Show, but of course, the Mandalorian and the Prisoner. And I think, Jason, let's just cut right to the chase. I loved it. I think it was my favorite episode so far. It had all of the elements that I love so much. It had everything. So we'll get right into it, I'm sure. Whew. But yeah, I'm blowing my load early.
Man.
But you did too.
I did because as you were taking care of some things there in the Chicago studios, I was talking to our guest who's going to be we didn't pre-announce this at all. I think he might have told his legions of adoring fans, but we know a lot of Rebel Force Radio listeners are going to be super excited because he's back with us. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the Geek Out Loud Meister himself, Mr. Steve Glossen, joining us.
Well, let me tell you something, dude. When you come out here to the Outer Rim and you want to do some bounty hunting, bro, you got to get with the Mando Maniacs. Yeah.
There you go.
They're taking their vitamins, they're saying their prayers, and they're carrying their baby Yodas around, dude.
Yes. There we go. Bravo, sir. Bravo.
Very nice. Well, I knew if one guy was going to be able to settle the, the Hulk Hogan versus Macho Man,
well, you had the Macho Madness. So if you want to do the Mando Madness, oh yeah, the Mando Madness, yeah.
All right. Well, I still got to come on and talk to wrestling with you at some point. But my knowledge ends in like 1990.
So does all of ours. Yeah.
Anyway, well, Steve, it is so great to have you on the program. We really appreciate you joining us. You've been on our list of folks that we've wanted to have on for a while, and I know we're all chomping at the bit to talk about this particular episode. But since you haven't been on the show with us in a while, let's start with your thoughts. We're more than halfway into this series. We're at episode 6. We're chapter 6. We have 2 more to go.
Yeah,
but tell us where.
Absolutely.
Tell us where's your head when it comes to the Mandalorian? What's it touching you as a fan? Where is it touching you as a fan?
I have loved this show from day one. They suck you in with an incredible pilot, with an incredible opening, and the surprise reveal of Baby Yoda at the end, and then you're just on this journey with this dude. And who, everything from, golly, and I know you guys have said it, but like there's Super Nintendo game references throughout in certain ways. It seems like there was a shot in the very first pilot episode of it was a long shot of the speeder going across the ground, and it looked like something straight out of episode 4. And then you flash forward to last week's episode, and you're in the cantina. You are in the cantina on Tatooine, and there was nothing wrong with that in the whole wide world.
I don't know, man. Some say that was just fan service.
Well, then let me ask you something. If you're making something like this, who do you want to serve more than anyone else?
Yeah.
You know, at some point,
I agree.
You know, the thing is there's fan service where things are shoehorned in, and then there's fan service that makes sense. Outer Rim, Tatooine, trying to lie low, trying to find some work, trying to find some money. Tatooine makes sense. Mos Eisley Spaceport. What will you never find there? A more wretched hive of scum and villainy. And so of course that's where he's going to go. And it was just a perfect, I mean, it felt very unforgiven. Like I expected Mando to look at that gunslinger kid at one point and be like, hell of a thing killing a man. But I thought it was great. And then you've got the mystery at the end of whose boots were those and what's coming down the pipe. And now this episode was, it was one of these things where I didn't know you were allowed to do this in a television show, in a 37-minute television show. It's fantastic. The storytelling has been succinct. It's been on point. It has been everything. I said this before we went on the air. They have used brush strokes. Every brush stroke that Lucas ever used with his creation of Star Wars, they've used samurai, sci-fi, Western, fantasy. It's all there. And this show and this episode just gets right into some of the sci-fi elements of that, but also it's everything we ever wanted dealing with the underworld of Star Wars. This has been a fantastic show. It's been my favorite Star Wars thing really since the Clone Wars or since Revenge of the Sith, since Return of the Jedi. Insert last great Star Wars thing here, and it's been my favorite Star Wars thing since that.
Yeah. Well, let's get into the specifics of this episode, give you the tail of the tape here. We are talking about Chapter 6. It was called The Prisoner and originally aired on December 13th, 2019, for those of you listening to this into the future. Written by Rick Famuyiwa. I'm hoping I'm saying that right. Famuyiwa. And co-written by Christopher Yost. Also directed by Rick Famuyiwa. I think this is the only episode so far that we've seen directed by Rick. I know there's some repeat.
No. I believe he may have directed the second episode, I want to say.
Was it the second? I thought that was Deborah Chow.
No, she directed the third one.
The third one. All right. Mm-hmm. Okay, fine. So Rick's returning.
There's a rotation of them, I believe. It was Filoni, this guy, Deborah, and Ron Howard.
Bryce Dallas Howard,
yeah. And then they repeated.
Yes.
So they did 4, and then they're not all getting 2.
Everyone is on the back stretch right now.
Yeah, I thought they were getting 2.
No, because Favreau's doing the last 2.
I don't believe that's correct.
Oh.
I think Filoni is directing the final one.
All right.
Oh wow.
Well,
okay.
let's settle this, okay?
Oh no, that's
gentlemen.
Maybe that.
Let's settle this. No, we're going to settle this right now, so that people don't email us and spend all this time. It does happen.
That does happen. But Jason, you're the one who painted us into this corner, so you're on your own, pal.
Chapter 1, directed by Dave Filoni. Chapter 2, directed
Damn
by
you,
Rick
Steve!
Famu.
And you're not having to hit all these buttons.
It's better coming from him.
All right.
Chapter 3, my Google Foo knows no bounds. Chapter 3, Deborah Chow. Chapter 4, the aforementioned.
Wait! I missed the first 2. I missed the first 2 because I was talking over
Dave
you.
Filoni, and then Rick Famuyiwa.
Oh, okay. Rick was episode. All right, fine.
And then the Deborah Chow. Chapter 4, Bryce Dallas Howard. Chapter 5, the Gunslinger, our boy Dave Filoni. Mm-hmm. And then this is Chapter 6, Rick Famuyiwa.
Yeah.
And then Chapter 7 is set to be directed by Deborah Chow, with Chapter 8 being directed by Taka Waititi. That's the.
So there's not everybody's getting 2.
Not everyone's getting it. That's right. Taika. Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
I'm sorry, I forgot about him.
So Rick comes back to us with episode 6 or Chapter 6, with Chapter 6 after Chapter 2. Right? Are we good on the tail of the tape?
Yeah.
How long was this? You know what this doesn't say. Was it another 39-minuter?
Well, I think this was closer to 45 minutes, actually. 43 to 45.
The credits roll at I've got it pulled up, Jimmy. I'm sorry to be that jerk.
No, please do that.
The credits roll at 38:40.
Ah,
yeah.
Okay. All right. Good credits, though. I love the.
I love the artwork.
I was thinking to myself, how cool is it that they incorporate the concept art into the actual end of the show, so we don't have to go to some website to go look at it. Right. It's just let's keep it all in house, and I like that a lot.
Yeah, I like that too. I think that it just gives it that kind of vintagey TV vibe too, which I like.
There is that,
and I can't necessarily point, and say, oh, this show did it, but there's just something about it. I like it. It's it has that 1970s, 1980s kind of feel.
Speaking of, have you guys touched on the music that plays during the credits, like the Big Mando theme? Like it starts out with that kind of percussion laden thing that goes on with just kind of some of the different, and then it goes into almost like a Gremlins theme with some synthesizer, like ding, 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 and then it ends with the Rocky music.
Yeah, that's Ludwig.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I get excited every time I hear that theme. I love it. I really do. And I it's not something that I have, just at the ready, on my iPod. I know they've been really generous and they've been releasing the soundtracks for each episode available online, and I just haven't loaded them up into my phone. I think once the series is over, I'll probably create a little playlist and do that and kind of take a deeper dive into the music. But it's it's mainly atmospheric. I wouldn't say that it's any they're not creating any grand motifs here. This isn't John Williams until it is.
Right. But the in this particular episode, one thing that I did notice was the use at times. The Twi'lek lady, she almost had her own theme, and it was done by just basically scratching a bow across a violin.
Oh yeah.
Very creepy a lot of times with her. I noticed kind of an off-putting feel.
A metallic sound, kind of representative of the fact that she was a knife wielder. That was her preferred weapon of choice, were those blades. So I think that's sort of the vibe that I was getting from that musical note, if you want to call it that.
Yeah,
I hear it in my head too.
They want to create sort of a discomfort, when she's she's on the screen.
Person.
She was. Yeah. I'm watching the show as I do each, every week with my kids, and my daughter, who's a big Harry Potter fan, she goes, "Oh, she reminds me of Bellatrix Lestrange." Helena Bonham Carter's version of Bella. Oh, he's like licking her teeth and her lips and making these weird face. By the way, I know that Bib Fortuna had the jaggedy teeth, but I don't remember the Twi'leks having fangs.
His were kind of pointy. His teeth were kind of pointy.
He had, but all of them were. It was like they were almost all filed to be kind of like sharp teeth, but she clearly had fangs.
Yeah, well, I like that. The Mando apparently liked that too in the past.
Well, there is that implication, right?
There's implications. And we also learned that the Mando certainly does keep his helmet on at all times. Even...
I keep my socks on.
Okay. Whatever floats your boat, but I'm getting uncomfortable.
I think we already lost Steve. I think Steve left.
Guys, I'm not going to lie to you. I just Googled Twi'lek teeth.
Okay. Don't act like it was your first time, Steve.
I actually am finding out here apparently that although Twi'leks naturally had blunt teeth, males typically sharpen them.
Oh. Males.
Okay.
So that means that what is the girl's name? It's terrible. Like,
yeah, it's Jiri.
Jiri.
Yeah.
No,
Xi'an. But you know what? We just thanks to the folks in our chat, Lisa Dullard. Oh, Lisa, long time Rebel Force Radio listener. And I'm going to put it up on the screen. Natalia Tena, who played Xi'an, also played Tonks in Harry Potter. So maybe that's why my daughter was getting that Harry Potter thing going on.
Yeah.
So that's very cool. So thank you.
I was detecting notes of Harley Quinn for some reason.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Just, with the flirtatious stuff, I guess. And the deadliness, the overall deadliness.
Yeah, right.
But who does she remind you of when she's balancing the blade on her fingertip? Because if somebody in the chat might point me into some direction there. I seem to remember like they were doing it in Carlito's Way. Or,
we need Billy Mack for some of these references.
Yeah.
We get into the 90s Pacino roles. We need Bill.
Could be taking a turn in a crazy direction with that. But if anyone has any other influences for why that character was doing that balancing act with the knife, I really thought that was great. I loved all the mercenaries. Let me tell you. I hope we have time to talk about each.
Yes. I definitely want to do that because before we started the show, Jim, when Steve and I were just completely blowing our loads, before we were able to get you back on with us. So I said to Steve, as soon as I was done watching this episode, I wanted all 5 of those action figures, and to me, that's the hallmark of a good Star Wars character. When you're like, I gotta have these, and they also lived up to something that is very Star Warsy, which is one glimpse at the character, and you feel like you know them. They have a history. You can see the history and what they're wearing, how they carry themselves, and that's not an easy thing to do all the time. And I think that's the Dave Filoni learning from George Lucas influence that we're seeing there. These characters need to be instantly recognizable to an extent where you go, they seem familiar, or that immediately they're giving you the vibe that that sort of encompasses their character.
Absolutely. I totally agree with the action figure comment. I was on a high this morning after watching the episode. And with, kids home from college and people around me at that time of the morning, they can't deal with me when I am buzzing as much as I was when this episode ended. I declared it the best damn Star Wars thing I've seen in a long time. And I say so unabashedly here live on Rebel Force Radio tonight because I really believe that. I hear people saying, I saw some insane headlines before we started the show about how this show is just kind of spinning its wheels, how it's not advancing the story. We didn't learn anything more about Baby Yoda. We didn't learn anything. The Mandalorian kept his helmet on another episode. We didn't learn anything, this and that. Well, number one, that's wrong because there were little tidbits of information being dropped in about the state of the mythology as it is at this point in season 1. And the most interesting thing was the acknowledgement by other people that the Mandalorians have been all but wiped out. Mm-hmm. And that's something we were led to believe, but that is the general perception of the Mandalorians throughout the galaxy. They've been wiped out, much like the Jedi were when we start with A New Hope in 1977. Mm-hmm. So parallels to the original foundation of the mythology when you're dealing with members of a warrior race who are now all but extinct and on the run. I don't believe that the Mandalorians have been hunted down necessarily, but they are in hiding when we meet the community earlier in this season. So that's something that does move the story forward. But for all those people who are pounding their fists on the table, you have to realize that Star Wars as a mythology isn't something you download. It's something you experience. And it's a thrill ride along the way. You don't want the entire mythology to be busting its nut so soon. You have to let it play out. This isn't a video game. These guys are creating the new chronology of Star Wars, and they're filling in a very important blank.
Well, it's a new mythology, and Werner Herzog said, Steve, that what Dave and Jon Favreau are putting together is exactly that. They're creating a new mythology, certainly on the foundation of Star Wars, but its own thing. I mean, Jimmy said there's a lot to unpack in what he said, and I couldn't agree more. But first and foremost, the fact is, do you think that there are some people watching this show that are expecting too much too soon? They're not letting it breathe. They're not letting it build. They want to know everything. And Jim's analogy is a good one. They want to download it all and know it all right away.
It's the culture of binge watching, where people can go episode to episode and find out everything as quickly as possible. But also, I think that the people who are digging this show aren't familiar. And I know that this is Jon Favreau's. He's ultimately the showrunner. But I also know that Dave Filoni is heavily involved with the day-to-day with this thing, and this whole series has Filoni's storytelling fingerprints all over it. Yep. If you go back and you watch Rebels, what you find is they would do these episodes that seemed so disconnected and things that didn't seem to move the story along until you get to the end of a season, or really maybe sometimes even the beginning of the next season or the middle of the next season, and all of these loose ends would come back together and be tied together. And I think it's just the ride. You've got to go along for the ride with this, because we don't know the Mandalorian. And we know everything we need to know about Baby Yoda, that he is on the lam with the Mandalorian. And for whatever reason, this cold-hearted bounty hunter chose to treat him almost as a foundling and to protect him. He went against the code of the Bounty Hunters Guild to protect this thing. And we know enough about Yoda and how he and Yaddle, for those really well-versed Star Wars fans, are the only ones of this species we've ever been in contact with. And so we know enough to know this is a big deal. And I just think it's about just taking the ride. And also there's part of getting to know the character of Baby Yoda a little bit. He has a moment in this episode that's very much more than just the cooing and the gurgling. The moment when... it's a great comedic moment when he's got his hand outstretched and then Mando shoots Zero from the back, and then Baby Yoda's like, looks at his hand like, what, did I just do that? It's a great moment. And you see that this isn't a baby per se. He's 50 years old. And so there is some knowledge, or there is sentience there. It's not like a little helpless baby necessarily. And so it's, I think it's patience. People have to have patience with this, because if you can just take each individual episode of its own accord, this is fantastic, fun storytelling.
Well, here we are at this point in the season. Steve, do you have any kind of predictions about Baby Yoda's origin? Do you want to make any sort of predictions?
You know what? I haven't even given it any thought, Jim, because I was so shocked at the appearance of this species. And I remember when that first episode aired, as we're watching, we were all kind of whispering to each other, 50 years old, 50 years old. Is it Ezra? Is he hunting Ezra? Is he doing, like we were trying to make all these connections, and our minds were blown when that little cradle opens up. And at that point, I'm like, I have nothing to offer here, because Lucas did such a good job over the years of giving us nothing about Yoda or his species. And so as far as his origin goes, it could be anything from a creation of the Force to this is one of the, maybe they are wheels, maybe that's what Yoda and his species are, the wheels. And this is one of them, and how they're created, who knows? But here he is. And there are other questions like, were those people guarding him when they went to take him? There's so many things that, like, what was he doing there where he was on that planet, with Nick Nolte and all the Klaatu and Nikto and everything? What were they doing with him? What were their plans for him? And, these are things that don't really get discussed very much. There's a lot of questions surrounding this little guy, but I'm also very content to have those things answered as they need to be answered. Yeah. I'm really, this show, and I don't mean to make this, I hope this doesn't sound like a cop-out. I have enjoyed this show so much episode to episode that I've almost thrown speculation out the window, because I've just enjoyed every bit of it so much. And I've just enjoyed getting to know new characters. I've enjoyed getting to see some new planets and go back to ones we've known. It's just that. So
that's a really interesting point, Steve. Is the role of, and we promise we're going to get into, as Jim mentioned, all of these characters. We should mention that we are taking your calls, 708-866-1737, 708-866-1737. Give us a call. We'll pop you on and you can sound off on Chapter 6. But what Steve mentioned about the role of speculation, and when we were going back to the days, and I mean, when we really started as Star Wars podcasters speculating on a weekly basis, it was with the Clone Wars. And I not to put anything down, but it was an animated series, and oftentimes there was not a ton happening in the show, so speculation became a way for us to fill in the gaps. I'm kind of with Steve, and I don't want to speak for him, but for me, yes, I do love sitting and daydreaming and thinking about the series and what might be being laid out for us. But I also don't feel the need to. I feel like I'm getting enough fulfillment from what I'm actually seeing. I don't need to make up another 50, 60, 70% in my head and discuss that. What I'm seeing on screen is giving me plenty, Jim, to digest and discuss without having to worry so much about this reveal, that reveal. When are we going to see his face? When are we going to find out who Yoda Yaddle is? That kind of thing.
And also, I think we might be dealing with a story that will have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and won't be something that gets dragged out longer than it probably should. Hopefully, Baby Yoda isn't something that the corporations will want to exploit more than its shelf life, and we will always have Baby Yoda in our hearts forever. I tend to want Baby Yoda to be a clone that has a specific aging programmed into it where it never ages, and it'll always be Baby Yoda forever, and will live on forever, and we will always have Baby Yoda. I always think of that scene in Talladega Nights when they're saying grace before they have dinner, and I believe it's John C. Reilly who prays to Baby Yoda. Or no, not Baby Yoda, Baby Jesus. Sorry, Steve. Steve.
No, it's Will Ferrell, little baby Jesus.
It is Will Ferrell. Is it? Yeah. Always wants
baby ghost crib.
It's a baby because that is his preferred incarnation.
John C. Reilly says, "I like to think of Jesus wearing a tuxedo T-shirt."
Okay. See, I'd like to think of Baby Yoda wearing a tuxedo T-shirt. Right on. Baby Yoda is ageless. Baby Yoda will never grow older, but Baby Yoda will live forever. That's and that's what I want for Christmas. So, okay, here's a good idea.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at something in the chat here from a guy, Ulster Patty 1, who says, I read a cool fan idea / prediction that Mando was saved when he was a kid by Master Yoda, and that's why he had a soft spot for the kid. So maybe we'll see, and I think we eventually will see the flashback that we saw in earlier seasons or earlier episodes of season. We'll see that actually be played out a little bit more. So maybe when that battle droid does open that little bomb shelter area the kid was hiding in, maybe we'll see what happens then immediately after that. Maybe emerging from the dust and debris would be Master Yoda himself, because we all do know that Yoda did leave the temple and get his hands dirty during the course of the Clone Wars. So it's quite possible he was there on that planet cleaning up battle droids and found the Mandalorian
Yeah, that's a cool theory. I like that. I think that it's
it
probably a
was the
little
Mandalorian.
simpler. I think
The
that it
Mandalorian was taken in by Mandalorians.
was taken in by Mandalorians. But Jim, I keep going back to something you said earlier, which is something it never dawned on me before, and it's a really cool observation, is flipping the Mandalorians and the Jedi. So, as you say, in Episode 4, the Jedi are wiped out. They're only legends. No one's ever hardly seen one. And here with the Mandalorian, it's kind of the same. It's kind of the same deal. And that's why in the episode when the Mandalorian makes his escape with Baby Yoda with the aid of his fellow Mandos, that was a big moment for them because they essentially come out of hiding, whereas we're led to believe that their culture is such that they can only go to the surface one at a time so that they're considered to be rare. There could be a thing where, perhaps we don't know that Mandalorians, if you think about, the Japanese for many years after World War II, they weren't allowed to have an army, right? After World War II. So you can imagine maybe the Mandalorians are not permitted to have any kind of official or organized, force or something like that.
Well, no, I don't. I think they were wiped out by the Empire. We're dealing with a post-imperial society, and we hear results of that existence in this show because the Razor Crest itself is so desirable because it contains technology that was banned during the Empire, and it's not accessible to regular people in the post-war era. At this point, you hear. I think it was the droid who said, "I'm surprised this thing wasn't confiscated or impounded during by the Empire." Mm-hmm. So that was commonplace. The Empire suppressed technology and access to technology for the regular folk when it was enforcing its rule in the galaxy.
Well, and they also confiscated the Beskar. All the Beskar they get has the Imperial cog on it and that sort of thing. And to bring it into this episode, there's the whole idea of his helmet and not pulling his helmet off and everything. And yet we've seen in the Clone Wars and Rebels, we've seen actual Mandalorians with no problem taking their helmets off in the presence of others and that sort of thing. And so this really seems like a sect that is born out of a limited understanding of the fullness of Mandalore and what really went on. And so they hold this life in very high regard. And so they have now instituted almost religiously this concept of not taking your helmet off in front of anyone for any reason. Unless you're going to leave the clan, I guess. And
it's something else that pops up in this episode is, they're jokingly speculating that he could be a Gungan underneath his helmet. So
good stuff.
So, but what I think that tells me is that it's not always an assumption that if you're wearing Mandalorian armor that you are of the planet Mandaloria.
Right.
Or Mandalore.
Yeah, this is what I'm saying.
Is that the name of the planet? Mandaloria?
Mandalore.
Oh, I thought.
Sorry about the verbal typo.
Mandalorian. Well, it could be. I don't know.
Be comic book guy more. Why don't you?
Hey! Now.
So Mandalore. So the thought is that at this time it may not be an actual race of people, more of a religion, more of a maybe they're like the Hell's Angels. I don't know. But one thing we know is that they haven't ruled out the fact that Hisa could be a Gungan, according to Bill Burr. Under there.
Good stuff.
And of course, it's just appropriate that was, that line was voiced by Bill Burr, who's admittedly not a huge Star Wars fan. So him doing the Jar Jar speak was very appropriate. So
I was concerned that Bill Burr was going to be the sticking point for me in this episode when he showed up. I don't follow his comedy religiously. I'm familiar with a few of his funnier bits and some late night show appearances and that sort of thing. But I was really kind of like, is this going to be too hard to swallow? But I thought he did a great job. I loved his character. I love the line. I love the moment when that he's told that the Mandalorian is told he was a former Imperial sharpshooter, and the Mandalorian says, "Is there such a thing?" And he's like, "I wasn't a stormtrooper."
Yeah, wise ass.
and I loved his attitude. I really did like the cut of his jib, and I still say that gun backpack thing is off of a toy. The closest thing I've found is a He-Man character called Rio Blast that had some gun backpacks or whatever that would swing up, swing around. But I feel like that's not what I'm looking at.
Well, somebody in the chat, Steve, agrees with me that it looks like something off of the Predator.
Yeah, it's
that shoulder cannon,
spindly arm. It's a little spindly arm holding a gun, and it reminds me of something. And I can't put my finger on it. It's killing me.
I don't know.
Why do you sound like tisk tisk when you say it's from the Predator? Why are you like it's from the Predator?
Oh, because we were talking about it earlier.
Yeah, but I mean, what's wrong with it?
Nothing.
Oh, okay. I thought you were like.
No, I said no. I was saying that I said somebody else in the chat said it was like the Predator. That's what I think when I saw it. That's exactly what I feel.
Yeah.
But did the Predator's gun, isn't it more of like a War Machine kind of gauntlet or a Gatling gun on his shoulder?
No, it's just a little laser cannon. It's nothing huge.
It's just a little pew pew. But I'll tell you what I love about this show is that when George Lucas created the original Star Wars, part of his ingredient when he was making the stew in the kitchen was he threw in all the stuff he just thought was downright cool. Mm-hmm. And I like that the Mandalorian does that stuff to the point where it's like, well, when they're tucked into those little alcoves there along the corridor, very classic Star Wars, going back to A New Hope, and the opening sequence when they tuck themselves in away there, and they're in a laser battle, a gunfight, classic Western stuff. Mm-hmm. And it just is cool that he happens to have a little device that pops out of his shoulder and works around that. And it's just, I think when these guys are sitting there and they're devising these action sequences and stuff, they're saying, what would just be cool here? And maybe somebody said, well, remember the Predator had that little thing there? Oh, that was cool. Let's put that in. It's just mixing up the stew of everything that excites you and thrills you, and the visuals in this episode. I all of a sudden my head just went toward those floating R1 droids. Mm-hmm. That Clancy Brown's character, what was his name? Blug or Berg? Berg. Mm-hmm. Berg. I live in a Berg, in the burbs, and when he tackled those things and then threw that thing down the hallway, that was just like, now that's just damn cool. It doesn't.
I mean, that was like
scratch that itch better than that, man.
Yeah, like he didn't pull out a blast or anything. He just went right up, picked it up, body slammed it right there on the floor, crushed it. So we've got some folks that are on the chat that are saying, hey, this looks like Suicide Squad, right? It's a band of misfits and running around, and I think that there's some truth to that. But if you can imagine, I mean, these are all characters that are grounded in Star Wars. I mean, the Bill Burr character is maybe a little bit generic, but I mean, certainly everything from the Twi'lek to the droid to Clancy Brown. But how great to see Darth what's his name? Savage Press / Mr. Krabs. Yes, live action Clancy Brown. He was great, and so I don't know that I look at this and say that it's really derivative of anything really other than Star Wars. I mean, you got to, it's not like Suicide Squad invented, the ragtag bunch of mercenaries. It's the most recent, maybe one of the more popular ones, but I wouldn't necessarily say that they have the trademark on that. But so we liked I liked Jiri a lot. She was over the top. There's no question. She didn't leave much. She didn't hold much back, but I thought it was cool, and I thought that she the implied history between her and Mando was good. By the way, the show does seem to be providing, as we said, a lot of opportunities for comedic actors, stand-up comedians. Bill Burr being the latest, and it seems like every episode there's one. The one guy I want to point out, I think his name was Ran. Was it? Yeah. Mando's old friend that he meets. He kind of looked like an old Dan Fogler. A little bit.
He wasn't that the guy? Didn't he play Harvey Dent in Batman Begins?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought so.
Yes. He was
in Batman Begins.
Yes.
Yeah, he's the guy that Batman strings upside down. He's like, "Where are the other drugs going?"
Oh, yeah. Okay. That's a good
Mark
impression.
Boone.
Yeah. I liked him a lot. He's another one that as soon as you saw him on screen, you could sort of invent this whole history of him. So you find out that, he's somebody that the Mando ran around with clearly before he ended up doing work for the Guild, and has this history with Ran, has this history with Jian. Am I saying that right? Jian?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Jian. And obviously, history with Quinn. So,
yes.
And, I don't think Quinn was exactly what he was expecting to see behind that prison door. So a bit of a surprise. So this was sort of a jailbreak and revenge scheme, really, all at the same time. Though when they get back, after it's all said and done, I thought it was pretty funny that Rand clearly has no loyalty to anybody. So, there's this code that's like, yep, no questions, fine. The only thing he was interested in, that the job was done. He didn't care whether Mando was, put out a commission, whether they stole his ship, whether they did anything. It was just, did he bring back Quinn? He brought back Quinn, pay the money, no questions asked.
Well, this guy, I think he might have even been erasing some old problems with the gang, knowing that they probably wouldn't survive going on a mission with the Mandalorian. I think that could have come into play too, a little bit, almost as if I felt he seemed maybe even just a little bit relieved that some of those guys in the crew didn't make it back. Maybe he just had enough of Bill Burr and just wanted him gone, The guy never shuts up. By the way, a lot of people are all like, yeah, Boston representing the Star Wars galaxy now with Bill Burr, So it's like Red Sox Nation, Wicked Pissa, Star Wars. Congrats to everyone on the East Coast who now can watch Star Wars and feel represented.
Yeah, they can see themselves now on screen.
Or hear themselves at least.
Yeah.
Wicked Pissa.
I felt like that Ran or Bran or whatever his name was had that all of them. This was more of also kind of a, we're going to free Quinn, but in the meantime we're going to get our vengeance on Mandalorian for ducking out on us all those years ago.
Well, part of the story is that he was there and may have had a part in orchestrating the circumstances surrounding Quinn's eventual incarnation.
And so to me, it felt like they were kind of like, because they were all ready to push him right into that cell and be done with him. And so it kind of felt like a whole setup for kind of a revenge ploy. And so when he shows up and it's just him and Quinn, that's why dude's like, kill him. And going to send General.
Oh, right
out there.
Right.
Yeah, I meant incarceration, not incarnation, too. By the way, I don't know what I was thinking, but there's a history there. Clearly, brother and sister, they work together on this crew with the Mandalorian and Ran, and so there's that history there. And then there's the whole subplot with Zero the droid on board the ship. And I really enjoyed that droid. He had elements of Ralph McQuarrie concept art for Lam. Mm-hmm. And I picked up on that. And I also know that's a friend of RFR's, Chris Bartlett, who is underneath that droid getup, walking around in this episode. Chris is a guy that has always been friendly with us, and he cosplays as C-3PO, and so he's done a lot of official appearances on behalf of Lucasfilm over the years, in this just dead on C-3PO, that this costume he wears. It's amazing. I helped him suit up once at Rancho Obi-Wan. And so I was so happy to see his name in the credits for this episode. I think he appeared in the first episode. Is that Gorindon with the flute who summoned the Uber for the Mando? Yeah. I think that was also Chris. But to see him playing a droid, which I know doing that kind of, actual mime work that they're doing underneath those plates of armor and stuff. I know Chris is really somebody who's been cultivating the performance art of doing that for a long time. And so it's so great to see him get up into the spotlight like that, because he is actually a great guy. He's just a great guy. So congrats to Chris Bartlett. And Zero was cool. He was cool. A droid with a blaster rifle, and
he's a bit of a snoop too. You know, he kept going back through the transmissions from Grief Karga, and he's the one that kind of put things together. And throughout much of the episode, guys, I thought he was about ready to take off with Baby Yoda and try to claim that bounty. That's where I thought they were leading on this.
I thought we were going to have a cliffhanger episode.
Yep.
With Baby Yoda being lost to this droid. I don't know if I could handle the anxiety over the next 5 days to find out if Baby Yoda's okay. I mean, there would be sleepless nights for me, so I was so relieved.
I was fearful for him. I was fearful for him, for sure.
But the show keeps you on the edge like that, which is great. I was on my couch, like cuddled like in a ball holding my puppy. like he was Baby Yoda, and I'd never let him go. And so it was intense, but I was happy to see it all get wrapped up.
I was too. You know, I as I'm watching the show, time disappears for me, and so I have no idea how far in I am, unless one of the kids has to run to the bathroom and I have to pause it, and then I can see where it is. And I was with you, John. I thought this okay. So this is going to be our first big cliffhanger of the season, and we're not going to have any resolution. And not only do they end up resolving it, but I felt like they resolved it in a satisfactory way and a way that surprised me once again at the end. I thought they were dead. I did not expect to see a scene where they were all in a cell. So that leaves it, open, obviously, for them to continue maybe seeking their revenge. He's leaving these characters. In some cases, he's befriending people. In some cases, he's making enemies, in his wake, as he risks everything to protect this child. By the way, when you were talking about nice guys, another nice guy that was in this episode is our buddy Matt Lancer. Anakin Skywalker from the Clone Wars. Now, that was something I had no idea this was happening, and I had actually been talking to Matt throughout the Thanksgiving holiday. He was in my neck of the woods, as he has family here in Northeast Ohio, and I got an email from him, and we were emailing back and forth, and at one point he goes, "So what do you think of The Mandalorian?" And so I just emailed it. I think it's really good, and blah, blah, blah. I think it's the best thing since blah, blah, blah. And that was pretty much it. He didn't say, well, I'm in it, or hey, I got a cameo or anything. So as soon as I paused it right when I realized it was him, and I was like texting him, you didn't tell me you were in this episode. But so very, very cool as he played Davin. I don't think we're going to see Davin again, unfortunately. No. But
Davin's dead.
He is DOA, and I freaked at first because I was like, wait, and so I just like you, I freeze framed it, and also immediately emailed Matt. He responded to me about an hour ago and said he hasn't had a chance to see it yet, so he's in for a treat.
He's a busy guy.
Yeah. So of course he's probably watching it right now.
I'll be honest with you guys. I didn't realize that was him until I got on the social media and saw where someone had retweeted or reposted something he said about he was glad the secret was out. And so then I watched the second time. I'm like, that is him. And the other thing I didn't realize, to be honest with you, is that Berg was Clancy Brown until, again, I saw a tweet from Clancy Brown with a picture of him in makeup. And I'm like, oh my gosh, why did I not realize this?
Right. I'm the same way. I didn't notice that was Clancy, and when I saw his name in the credits, I thought, well, of course. Yeah. But with Matt, Obviously, Matt, outside of doing vocal work for the Clone Wars, he's had a very strong on-camera career in network television. And so when I wrote, Matt, I just said, so happy to see your face on the Star Wars episode. So that's great. So big congrats to Matt Lanter, another friend of the show who appeared in this episode, but there's more cameos. There are more cameos.
Lots and lots and lots of cameos, but I think we need some cameos here on our show, so I think we got to open up the phone lines. Still lots more to unpack and talk about here on Mandalorian After Show, but we got a new caller here from, it looks like from Virginia. Is Carlos there? Hello, Carlos. You're on with Rebel Force Radio. Hello,
can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Hey, you guys touched on a lot of cool stuff. By the way, first-time caller thing, whatever.
Thank you.
Really cool to be talking to you guys. I just wanted to talk about a couple things. This is a really awesome episode for sure. I wanted to talk about the cinematography at the beginning. I felt like we were getting right into this very genre-specific heist thing, and it struck me as so completely different from the other episodes. And I thought that was really cool. So it kind of straddled this non-Star Wars, Star Wars line for me. I thought that was awesome.
Yeah, that's what it's cool that you pick up on that.
Additionally, additionally, I think that I never thought I'd see the day where there was like hints of kind of this very high-paced trap percussion in a Star Wars episode.
Yes.
So I got to commend Ludwig for that as well. I thought that was great.
Yeah, he definitely bends the boundaries of where Star Wars soundtrack music has gone along the way. I'm really loving the score in this show. It sets a great tone, and it's not pigeonholed into one specific style. Sure, we get a lot of those nods back to the old from the Good, Bad, the Ugly. What was it? Ugly? What was his name? Ennio
Morricone.
Morricone. What's the matter with me? I'm still like riding this high from this morning where I was a total spaz. I was told to walk the dog 5 times today by my family members. 5 times I had to go out of the house, just burn off some of the energy that this episode provided me. It's been a real 1-2 punch in the last 24 hours being a Star Wars fan with that.
I gotta be honest, I'm kind of the same way.
Yeah, the Kylo Ren trailer for The Rise of Skywalker, and then this episode of The Mandalorian has just been such an amazing thrill ride for me as a fan over the last couple of days, and it's just a precursor of big bombs to drop next week. So I hope we make it through this okay. We might have to pull out the Rebel Force Radio oxygen tent for me from time to time, and hopefully we won't need those RFR defib paddlers that Steve will be applying to me at some point over the next week or so. Clear. Yes, thank you. You remember, always say that. Mm-hmm. And that stuff, of course, is available at the Rebel Force Radio shop at rfr.com. Well, as soon as we get...
He's going to have to watch the Kenobi series in an iron lung, Jimmy Mack.
No. We are working closely with the FDA, though, for future RFR merch.
Well, so, and the licensing hoops you guys jumped through to have it be R2-D2 that the defibrillator paddles come out of.
Yeah, well, that was quite a coup. I'll take credit for that one. So, Carlos, in addition to this particular episode, I'm assuming you've seen it all so far. Any other thoughts about the series and where it might be headed?
So, I guess I have a couple things. I really am noticing just some of the details that stand out, especially with the Mandalorian and his combat this episode. Especially that scene, I believe he was going for Mayfeld, was it? And he was going down the hallway, and you had the flashing lights, and he would disappear, and then he would come back up, getting like those Batman hints from that combat.
Totally,
he gets shot.
Totally
I love that he gets beat up in these episodes, and he still kind of stands strong. Like, that's a really nice trait that reminds us that he is, that his invincibility is a character trait with his armor. It's not just kind of like this flawless kind of superhero that can't be touched.
Yeah.
You know, I really like that.
Right.
detail.
A Star Wars hero that gets beat up and loses once in a while. That's kind of a new thing. We haven't seen that for some time.
Yeah, at one point I don't know the alien's name, but he had the horns and things. Like at one point he
Deveronian, yeah.
You know, like.
Oh, I love that guy.
Really,
he lived to just beat things up. You know, that was his.
Yeah.
He just wanted
I
to
like
grunt.
this
It kind of reminded
introduction.
me of Andre the Giant in The Princess Bride.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's like, yeah, he's our muscle. If you know,
Right.
if you couldn't guess, but
yeah.
But yeah, I love that element of his character. It's kind of like the Hulk too, in a couple of ways. Some
Yeah.
people are calling him
Yeah,
Hellboy,
he ate
Star
that
Wars
door.
Hellboy. How dare you?
Star
He's not
Wars
Star Wars
Hellboy.
Hellboy. No,
There
he's
you
not.
go again.
Do not call him Star Wars Hellboy. He's Devronian, and their species has been around since 1977. Welcome to Mos Eisley. Okay?
And apparently they're fireproof.
Oh yeah.
They
Well,
are.
you know, he looks like he's from hell, so he might be used to that fire and brimstone. Hey, Carlos,
I've
thanks for
noticed that
calling.
The Mando's flamethrower is not very effective. It doesn't really shake off attackers very often. It did come into play with the Republic prison security droids, who I loved. I love the new droids.
Let's
in
talk
this
a little
episode.
bit about this, Steve. You know, this is the first time that we've really seen anything resembling, you know, the New Republic, at least in terms of its. I don't know, I want to say prime, but certainly we don't see very much of the New Republic in Episode 7. Right? They get wiped out pretty quick. So, what do you make of what we're seeing from the New Republic? Looks like they have nice, bright, shiny new droids, shiny new ships. Taxes must be through the roof in the galaxy far, far away.
They have incorporated mouse droids, Imperial technology.
Yes.
That's what I'm thinking. That's where I'm thinking this is just the incorporation of Imperial tech. Maybe the droids are something new, but like that ship looked like it's 100 years old, just like the rest of the used future of Star Wars. Inside it looked very, very sleek and clean, like the inside of the Tantive 4, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
It definitely felt Star Wars to me, but it also did feel like, where'd they get all this stuff from? And you can only assume they're just assimilating some of the Empire's technology into what they've got. What's really cool to me is if you look at the prisoners that are in there, it seemed that one of them seemed to be an Imperial officer of some sort.
Yes.
There was an Imperial officer in there, young guy.
And then you had fake Windu there.
Who?
As well, the bald guy, the fake Windu, the fake Mace Windu from the end of Phantom Menace.
I didn't notice him.
He was in there. Was he? They jailed him. Was Kitster in there too? As well?
Kitster wasn't in there, but Rio's twin brother was from Solo.
Yeah,
which I-
that's
saw
right.
him.
Right,
We
Rio
saw him.
Durant's. It's one of his species. And then there was kind of a big sloth-looking guy.
My wife said that looks like Goonies.
Oh
I'm
yeah,
like,
it did
okay.
look like sloth.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
So that was that was sort of like, I guess, the cantina moment for this episode where you had, the
Sure.
the
Well,
prisoners.
I tell you, they also had a Return of the Jedi moment when the Mandalorian dropped that door onto Berg, and you thought, oh, well, he just did the Luke on the Rancor move and everything's over now.
Oh,
in
yeah,
this
right.
fight. And then what a great twist that Berg just stands up, pushes
Yeah.
the door back.
Yeah, yeah.
No problem.
Only to take the double blast door then.
Right.
Yeah.
Over the blast doors. Over the blast doors.
Another thing that was kind of interesting was that we learned pretty quickly that Quinn really wasn't all that sentimental about his sister Jian. As he kind of sent Quinn did Jian and Berg on that little mission to go and try to take out the Mandalorian when he was working with Mayfeld to say, oh no, all right, they're distracted now. Let's split. And Mayfeld says, well, what about your sister? And he says, yeah, what about her? I don't care.
Nice family.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So, none of these people were really, none of these people had any kind of redeeming qualities. So I wasn't sad to see any of them get wiped out, taken out. I fully expected that they were killed, and find out at the end that they're not, which is kind of cool. But as we were saying, leading up to the end of this, I kept thinking, well, where's the cliffhanger? Where's the cliffhanger? And they didn't really give us one. And I got to tell you, I was completely satisfied. I didn't need one. I was glad they wrapped it up. Honestly,
yeah, I was bracing myself for it.
I think the cliffhanger is that those three are still alive in a cell,
right,
on that ship, and I truly don't think we've seen the last of them, and that's where I go back to the Dave Filoni style of storytelling. Like this, the fact that he left them alive is going to come back to haunt the Mandalorian, I believe. Maybe not this season; it may be next season before it happens, but
yeah.
But I think, I don't think. I watched real closely. Dave Filoni and crew blew up that Freemaker type space station pretty good.
Yes.
But I tried to watch and see if there was a way, if I could see a way that Quinn and Harvey Dent maybe have survived.
Well, you never know. You never know. Look at Captain Phasma. She survived. She looked like she was toast.
Darth Maul.
Oh yeah, anything's possible. All right, let's talk to. I think we're going to be talking here to Landon from Oregon. Landon, you're on with Rebel Force Radio, first time caller. Welcome to the show.
Hey guys, this is Landon. From Oregon. Hey, I know you guys already kind of talked about it a little bit, but I just want to go back to those cameos. Matt Lancer was. I know you guys noticed it. But I'm sitting there with my mom. I'm 17, almost 18. Actually going to turn 18 this Wednesday. But I'm sitting there.
Ooh, happy birthday.
I feel bad for thanks, man. I appreciate it. But I'm sitting there with my mom. I feel bad for her because every time I see one of these new people, I'm immediately like, Mom, did you just realize that? And for me, it's not a problem. But you think for certain fans, it's a problem for them to see these characters that they know from other things. Do you think it kind of takes them out of the story? What do you guys think? I haven't heard it from anybody yet, but.
So seeing Dave Filoni in the show, does that, is it a possibility that it could take you out of it? I think that, based on it, we haven't talked to Dave in a long while, but what I remember, I think that they probably had to twist that guy's arm to get in there and do that. I think that was something that Favreau probably lost a bet. Dave has never seemed the type of guy that ever wanted to go on camera. He would lend his voice occasionally to certain things. I mean, most notably, what was the droid from Rebels? I'm really having a hard time with names tonight.
Chopper.
Yes, we all know that Dave was the voice of Chopper. But the other two, I mean, I think you have to be a real insider or aficionado to even recognize them.
Really, that's true.
Yeah,
this little sequence was an inside joke. It was a tribute more than a joke, I should say.
It was all the directors.
And I don't think that John Knoll appearing as a Naboo starfighter pilot in episode 1 took anyone out of that sequence. Right. Now, we do know Filoni from the appearances here on Rebel Force Radio and seeing him on stage at conventions and what have you. We know him. We know him as a person, but I think it was a fine and fitting tribute.
I loved it. I loved it.
It's almost designed to take you out of it if you know who those people are. But I think it's fair that those guys get their time in the sun, because I think we're really looking at 3 minds, 3 talents that are going to be shaping the future of Star Wars in a very profound way. And if The Mandalorian is any indication of what they're going to be bringing to the table, I say let them fly in X-Wing ships every episode if they can keep bringing us stuff to this this degree. And I think it was a great little tribute. Some people were saying Filoni has already appeared in The Mandalorian. Some people are thinking that he was the dead body that was being dragged by the dewback across the Dune Sea in the previous episode, chapter 5.
I can't imagine Filoni letting himself go through that kind of torture.
Well, no, what happened was they rolled him over and he had his face covered, but you could see hints of a beard.
Oh, I have to go back and look at that. But I did like his name.
George. It was me.
Yeah, right. That's
George
George's
Lucas
cameo.
himself appeared on camera. George himself appeared on camera in Revenge of the Sith.
That's
Did
right.
that take you out of that moment? No, but I think it was great. Congratulations to Dave. I also sent him an email today saying it was great to see your
Trapper
face
Wolf
in Star Wars. Trapper Wolf.
Not to be
Tribute to the
confused with
Wolfpack.
Trapper John, MD.
Right, I was noting the MASH, the Trapper John, and I was thinking, and Trapper John, of course, was a character from where? Boston. So what is this, the all Boston episode of Star Wars?
What else is on your mind, Landon?
Well, I've been thinking about, because with all the Game of Thrones people getting out of the way for like the directing or writing or whatever, we have this announcement supposedly coming up in January about these new director for the movies. What do you think the chances are of a Jon Favreau or Dave Filoni or one of the directors like Deborah Chow being that announcement in January? What do you guys think about that? Somebody they might be under their wing. I
kind of doubt it. I kind of doubt it. I think that group is going to stick with the TV stuff, the streaming stuff. I think they're too now. A Jon Favreau directed Star Wars film or a Jon Favreau written Star Wars film, that makes a lot of sense to me. I don't.
Well, I mean, you have to think he's so busy with that other stuff, though. Like, Mandalorian, he doesn't work on.
Well, he could also. Yeah, look. Jon Favreau could very easily pass the. Pass everything on to Dave Filoni in future seasons.
I would love to see that.
And so that could be all right. So Dave's going to move on, and he's going to handle Mandalorian, for a couple of seasons solo. Jon Favreau goes on to clean up, the mess that is Star Wars movies.
Stop.
Sorry.
One week away from The Rise of Skywalker. We vented on this week's show. We're done venting.
I'm excited too. I really am.
Yeah.
No
but
more
I can't hide the frustration. I don't need to. I have a Star Wars podcast that I can come on and talk about every week. I don't need to hide it. But anyway, go ahead,
What's wrong,
Steve.
I have a quick mea culpa I have to make. I was saying that that Mark Boone played Harvey Dent in Batman Begins. Harvey Dent, as we all know, is Two-Face, and that makes me an idiot. And then I thought he was Bullock, but Bullock was the detective that was played by Porkins in the 1989 Batman. Mark Boone played the detective Flass in Batman Begins. So I just want to make sure that everyone knows that I know who Harvey Dent is. And I apologize to those of you who have probably had conniptions or aneurysms because I got the name wrong earlier on.
You know what, Steve? I was like this close. If you roll back the tape and you hear me go, what? He what?
Yeah.
But you know what? But hey, but you're the godfather of the Golliverse. I wasn't about to call you out
I know,
on that.
look,
I was like, boy, I'm gonna.
Yeah, he stole money from the falafel guy. Yeah, the Euro guy.
Well, hey, Landon, thanks so much for calling, man. Don't be a stranger. I hope this is your first call. I hope it's not your last.
I'm a big fan of you guys. Thanks for having me.
Hey, thank you very much, and again, happy birthday to you.
More birthday shout outs.
Who else we got?
Today is December 13th, Friday the 13th, and it is the day that Dylan McInerney was born. He's 17 years old today.
My gosh.
Shut up.
Happy birthday, Dilly Dog.
Dylan was like 5 years old when we started doing all this stuff.
Oh my gosh.
He was 3.
No, he was 3 years old.
He was 3. We have that recording of him that I recall when he was 3 years old, and he was playing on the floor with Star Wars action figures and a sand crawler. And now he's 17, and he's playing Red Dead Redemption. And just living in the time, in the golden age right now for video game violence for kids everywhere. So.
Hey, let's go back to the phones we go. Let's see, who else do we have here? How about Nick? Hey, Nick from Vegas. You're on with Rebel Force Radio. Hello.
Hey, thanks for having me. Hello.
Oh, our pleasure. What's going on tonight?
So I wanted to get your thoughts on a couple things. Also, shout out to Steve, Master of the Golaverse, big fan forever.
Yeah.
I was wondering what you guys thought about how the concepts for each of these characters in these episodes are built so perfectly. Every episode comes, the Mando encounters new vibrant characters, and I can really tell that John and Dave, they're not afraid of Star Wars. They put in the Deveronians, they put in the Twi'leks, they do all this stuff. But each character that the Mando meets is like a bouncing, like what's the word I'm looking for? Like a board for him to bounce off of, and it keeps building on the character more and more. And at the end of the episode, we might not see those characters he meets, but it helps inform the Mandalorian. So I really appreciate how they've kind of structured the episodes. So every episode you're learning more about this guy with no face. And I thought that was really cool. And I really appreciate how they're not afraid of Star Wars, and they're really just letting the character grow.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you for saying that. You know, and I appreciate the sentiment when you say, you know, not afraid of Star Wars. And I don't think that J.J. Abrams is afraid of Star Wars. But my God, clearly they can create Twi'leks, and they can create Deveronians, and they can create these droids that look like they just walked out of Episode 4. I don't know what the hang-up is with these terrible-looking, fleshy, pasty white aliens that they've got in this sequel trilogy universe. It's awful.
It's the same mindset of none of these characters are in future movies, so we have to kill them off in this movie. Whether it's whether it's Cassian Andor and Jen Erso and company, or whether it's Beckett from Solo and his whole crew. You know, you had some great characters there that had more life in them, and they're like, we're going to do away with them. Well, here, you know, you've got Filoni like, well, you know, I can just see it now. We'll put Twi'leks in there. They belong there. Twi'leks belong in Star Wars. Deveronians belong in Star Wars. The Girundan aliens, I mean, we haven't seen those since 1977 for crying out loud, and we've had 2 in this series. And a sandcrawler for crying out loud, Jawas, and
well, I mean, is some of it that they think they're going to out George?
Well, it's a soft reboot. It's a soft reboot. They're trying to reshape the entire aesthetic of Star Wars by making their modern additions, which is great. I mean, of course, we encourage that. We want creativity. We want new aspects to the environment and the universe to be unveiled in each and every episode, in each film, in each animated series. We want all of that, but not at the cost of abolishing the previous history and look and feel and vibe. That's what's so great about an episode like this. It really brings it all together. You had nods to the original trilogy. You had nods via dialogue to the prequels with the mention of a Gungan. You had nods to the existence of sequel era mythology with mentions of Canto Bight. And
that was of course
of course, and then the prisoner who resembled the same species as Rio from Solo. So you're even now bringing in the spin-off films. It's making the universe come together, while the sequel trilogy tried to recreate the universe in some new fashion, some different vision. It's fine to add, but don't take away. Use it all.
And that's what George did. And that's what George did with the prequels. He did add, but he also didn't take away. So he knew he needed to ground you in some familiarity.
Yes.
Did you guys happen to notice? I think you mentioned it earlier, how there's kind of a retrofitting of Imperial stuff with the mouse droids and everything. The big probe droids that are roaming down the halls.
Yes.
Those are actually droids that are in the lineup in Episode 4 when Lars Homestead.
They're R1.
Oh my gosh, that's right. Yes,
they are R1 droids. They're floating R1 droids.
Even have the
I
same
was
paint
blown
job.
away.
Yeah,
I think
that's
it's
the
really
thing.
interesting how they're taking from everything, like you said.
Yeah, Jim, I didn't catch that. I heard you saying that they were R1 droids, and it wasn't until Nick just referenced the Lars Homestead that I remember them being out there in the lineup.
Right.
Yeah.
You're not going to
Very
listen to
cool.
me. The stranger is always right.
No. I just thought that,
It's like
you
my
just
wife.
got it off of the Wikipedia entry for this particular episode. Yeah, right. Jimmy's
I
just
learned
white
from
noise to me.
Jimmy.
After
I'm just an
14
apprentice.
years, he's just white noise to me.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that is true. Finally, the truth comes out.
Yeah, right.
A week before the rise of Skywalker. That's my Christmas present from Jason this year, the truth.
The truth, that's right. All right. Hey, Nick, thank you so much, man. Appreciate the call. Let's get a few more in here. How about Mr. This looks like our old buddy Dan Larson. Is this Dan Larson from Utah?
It is. How
Hey.
you guys doing?
Hey, good. How are you?
Good talking to you then.
Nice to talk to
Hey,
you.
I just wanted to kind of jump back to what Steve was talking about earlier.
Yeah.
How you're talking about how you're glad that the series isn't just giving away the story immediately. Because I look at this and I think, next week we're going to get the end of the Skywalker saga. We have nothing on the forefront for film. And if The Mandalorian just gives this story away, what do we have in the future for the next, 9 months, 12 months? And so I'm glad that they're kind of holding back the story, giving us these great characters and kind of developing them. And my suspicion is that at the end of this season, there's going to be a huge cliffhanger, and we probably won't know much more than we currently do.
Well, all right. So Dan, I want
My thoughts, I don't know.
to. Yeah, no, that's a good thought, and I'm gonna pitch this to a version of this to Steve and Jimmy Mack as well, because this is coming up on the chat, and I want to make sure that those that may feel that we're being overly kind to this show know that we're looking at this thing from all angles. So what you're voicing, Dan, is the positive side. What I'm seeing on the chat is the negative side of this. See, some people are saying, hey, you guys are missing the obvious. This show doesn't have an overarching plot. They're just kind of meandering through from episode to episode. Where's the overall conflict? What's the general plot of this show?
No, I can answer that.
Well,
It
let's
was
see
all
what.
set up.
Okay,
right at the
Jimmy's
in
already
the
got it.
first
So
episode.
Steve, just stand by.
Okay.
He's chomping at the bit to answer this one. What is the overall arching plot?
Well, I'll tell you, and you don't have to look any further than the old Fugitive series. This is a guy on the run, and he has something that other people want. And each week he goes through different adventures to survive and protect what he has in an effort to eventually earn his way toward freedom. That's what this show is. It's
Mando on the run.
there you go. You always have a Mandalorian song for us, Steve, and that's why what makes you so precious. But that's what it is. It's the element of the hunt and the hunter being hunted. And of course, protecting Baby Yoda. What more do we need to know about these characters other than the dire situation they're in right now? That's the story. And then each week we get gradual insights into what makes these characters tick, what their history is, and who they really are.
All right.
We don't want all those mysteries to be answered in the first episode. Let's let the story unfold. Like I said, we don't have to download this stuff.
Well,
let's
let me
just experience it.
Let me play devil's advocate for a little bit here, just for a second. And Dan, you can feel free to chime in on this. Let's start with Steve.
Mm-hmm.
So what you might be able to complain about, if you're looking for something to complain, is, well, we're not seeing the other side of it. We see everything from the Mando's point of view, but what's going on with Herzog's character? What's going on with that team of scientists and Imperial remnants that are now looking for Baby Yoda, presumably looking for Baby Yoda. Why aren't we seeing them go back and forth? Here's what's going on with Mando and Baby Yoda, and here's what's going on with, Jim used the analogy of the fugitive. So where is the Tommy Lee Jones / whatever the other guy's names was?
It's the old
Inspector Javert, if we take it to the Les Mis.
Yeah, it's the old Incredible Hulk TV show. Where's Jack McGee, who's always on the trail of the Hulk whenever he goes from town to town.
And who was the guy on the A-Team? Who was the general that was always looking for him?
What was the general's name on the A-Team? I don't know.
But the same thing, yeah.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, and I will say this: they're out there, and their presence is looming out there. It's a big galaxy, and right now the Mando has been trying to stay under the radar. I mean, he spent how long on the one planet with Cara Dune and the villagers and everything before he was found, and knew he had to get on the run again. I think the whole idea is they're out there, and that episode did a lot to show that. I think that one of the things that we've become so accustomed to in television viewing, not just in binging, but we went, back in the mid to late early 2000s, before the 2010s, yet we started to see a lot of serialized storytelling on TV. Very much week leading into week. Whereas used to, TV didn't necessarily do serialized unless it was a soap opera. And, you think of shows like The X-Files, where The X-Files was a show that had a mythology that ran through the entire series, but oftentimes you'd maybe get 6 or 7 mythology episodes dealing with the aliens and that sort of thing in a season, maybe 10. And the rest of them would be like Monster of the Week kind of stuff. Right. And I think this is a throwback to that kind of television in some ways. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, because with each episode, I've watched each episode 2 or 3 times a piece, and because I just want to go back and take everything in. And I constantly feel that kind of stress of they're still out there looking for him. Just because he got away from the Bounty Hunters Guild doesn't mean they're not still out there. Just because he got away from Werner Herzog, there's still that one Moff character that's out there that we've not seen yet, that's played by Gus from Breaking Bad.
Yes, Gus Fring.
And so we know something is coming.
So it's possible to feel their presence even though you're not necessarily seeing them.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Daniel, what say you?
Yeah. So I absolutely agree with Steve where, it feels a little bit procedural, but I don't think it really is. I think at the end of the day, as we take this series further into seasons 2 and 3, you'll see the story start to get fleshed out, but this really is the story of the Mandalorian. And so this is the reason why it's focused on him versus we have a scene with him and then we jump back to the Empire and we come back with him. This is his story and we need to follow that through. And so I do feel like in the next season or so, we're going to start to see more of, who is this Baby Yoda? Why is this important? But right now we're kind of focused on their relationship and kind of exploring the galaxy and getting kind of a wide breadth of the Star Wars universe. So I see a lot of people's points and kind of poo-pooing the show, but at the same time, I feel like just be patient. This isn't a Breaking Bad. It's not a Game of Thrones. This is a little bit of a throwback to the old storytelling style of television.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think it's a bit of a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, I agree 100% with what Daniel's saying. And I think just everyone in the rush to have every bit of information at their fingertips because they're so accustomed to the internet age, where you can just get information on demand. I think it's created an audience that has very little patience. We have to let this thing slow burn with us a little bit. And that's a lot of what made the mythology of Star Wars become such a palpable thing for me in my life, is the downtime between episodes where we can speculate and build upon the stories that have been presented to us. Mm-hmm. And here, with live action Star Wars television, coming at us weekly, it's just it's really a dream scenario for me as a fan, and it's something that I am savoring. So let's all sit down, Daniel. You and me, we're going to sit down at the table, and we're going to have ourselves a gourmet meal, and we're not going to rush through this sucker at all. Right. Am I right? I like Daniel a lot. So,
that's
Daniel,
right.
Hey, Daniel, listen to me. I want to give you something I need to tell everyone about first is, Jason, do you have an image called Wayne art, I think might be the image?
Let's see.
It's in the folder. I give Jason a folder of some screen grabs and whatnot.
Yeah.
But I have an image, a beautiful art print from a great guy, a loyal RFR listener named Wayne Barnes. And Wayne has been creating these wonderful mashups of The Mandalorian and the vintage Marvel cover art from the old school. There we go. Yeah. Jason just put it on the screen there for everyone watching on YouTube. This is the work of Rebel Force Radio listener Wayne Barnes. Oh, it just disappeared.
No, it's up there.
Oh, no. Okay, it's The Good, the Bad, the Droid, the Child, and it's a nod to the old Clint Eastwood spaghetti westerns of the 60s.
That's awesome.
And, of course, the classic Marvel cover art from the 70s and 80s. And Wayne's been doing this, and he's got a few of them, and we're going to be giving them away here on the RFR Mandalorian After Show, one a week. And Daniel, you're getting the first one. And for everyone else who's interested in Wayne Barnes and his Mandalorian art prints, visit Barn Dog Art on Instagram. And there's a link to his Etsy shop in his bio. So what you want to do is go to @BarnDogArt, @BarnDogArt on Instagram. And there's a link to Wayne Barnes' Etsy shop in his bio. And you can then find these amazing Mandalorian bits of artwork he does. And also there's some Indiana Jones stuff in his portfolio, Batman, all kind of great stuff. And he really does one hell of a job capturing that classic art style from the old Marvel covers, as you can see here. So good stuff, Wayne. And thank you, Daniel, for being the caller of the week.
Yeah, I really appreciate it.
You bet, buddy.
Hey,
so
can I ask one last question real quick?
Well, what you need to do is send me your address so I can pass it along to Wayne. So get a hold of us at show@rebelforceradio.com. You promise you'll do this as soon as we hang up?
Yep, I absolutely will.
Okay, so let's hear what you got to say.
Well, okay, so one last question. I just want to know, what are the chances you guys can get Dave Filoni on after this season wraps? Like 0?
Well, you know, they've kind of put up a barrier around Dave as his profile continues to grow. And, you know, I would never say never. I'll tell you that. I would never say never, and the door is always open to Mr. Filoni anytime he wants to come back with his old friends here at Rebel Force Radio and throw down with some serious Star Wars discussion, because I know you guys miss it. And we presented it to you as a service to Star Wars fans everywhere, where you would get unfiltered Dave Filoni commentary. But as the PR machine continues to grow around him, and the fact that I think Lucasfilm and Disney is going to bank a lot of the future on Mr. Filoni and Mr. Favreau specifically. So they want to keep us fans at arm's length right now. And the only way that'll change is if you reach out, publicity at Lucasfilm.com, publicity at Lucasfilm.com. Send them an email and say, hey, we want to hear Dave Filoni back with Jimmy and Jason. Come on. So that's the only thing I could suggest if you would like to hear us have future conversations with Dave Filoni. Or, you know, I always figure someday I'll run into him and it'll be like, hey, how come I'm not calling your show anymore? I'm like, I don't know. Why don't we make that happen? Come on, let's go. So there's a huge future for Star Wars, and we aren't going anywhere. Okay? Ain't nobody going to cancel Rebel Force Radio unless it's myself or Mr. Swank. And we got about 20 more years left into us, so let's make it happen. If you guys want it to happen and you make a loud enough noise, it'll happen. So,
well, Well,
Thank you so much for
congratulations,
support
Daniel.
there,
Appreciate
Daniel.
it. Yeah, and
Really
please get
appreciate
that email, show@rebelforceradio.com, so we can get that beautiful artwork out to you. Man, oh man, is that cool? Look at that. I love it.
Bane Barnes
Yeah,
is
that's
the
awesome.
artist.
That is
And
awesome.
that's Barn Dog Art.
All right, we
At
got
Barn
time
Dog
for
Art.
a couple more callers. Let's let's talk. I think we got someone from Texas here. Is this Jeremy from Texas? Hello, Jeremy from Texas.
Hey guys, how's it going?
All right, how are you?
Great, Jeremy. You're here to tell us how I'm right again. I love it when people say I'm right.
Oh, you're always right.
Yes.
No, one of my favorite things about what's been going on with the Mandalorian is just the classic Western stories that are in every single episode that we've seen 100 times, but now we get to see them in Star Wars, and it's hard to explain just how wonderful it is. You know, the unlikely alliance, the hero faces off against the beast, then you go back on the deal, and then let's see, what was episode 4? Oh, teaching the villagers how to face off against evil. The backstabber gets his just desserts, and then this episode I've seen these stories 100 times, and now we get to see them in Star Wars, and I love it.
But it feels as it's not like it's a departure as far as Star Wars is concerned.
No,
it feels like
not at all.
it fits. It fits the universe very well because we know that this is all part of the building blocks that created Star Wars in the first place in the mind of George Lucas.
Oh yeah, but it's still these stories that we know and love, and now we just get to experience them in Star Wars. And you know, it's one of those deals where the Mandalorian and the child are just characters that you instantly love, and we get to see them do these spaghetti Western stories that we've seen so many times, and I can't get over every episode and just how much I love it.
Yeah. Well said, and appreciate the call and appreciate the sentiment.
And I believe that too. I mean, these characters tonight. We loved them as soon as we saw them, these mercenaries. We wanted action figures of them. This is the future of Star Wars right here. This is Star Wars done right. Use this kind of storytelling for the template for future Star Wars storytelling. Look at the aesthetics. Look at the sets. Look at the aliens and droids. And it's so loyal and consistent to the Star Wars we know and love. This is not some reboot. This is a legitimate extension of the mythology that started in 1977 with George Lucas himself. This is Star Wars done right.
Yes. Well, and Jeremy mentioned, these stories that we know. He mentioned the Westerns, the mercenary type films, that sort of thing, those kind of stories. I've seen words like trope thrown around, and yeah, okay, sure. Stereotypical story, sure, fine. I really think these are the archetypes of American storytelling, these Westerns and these heist films and that sort of thing. These have become archetypal in American in the American pop culture and thus the world pop culture. And playing in this sandbox, well, I said earlier, you're painting with every stroke that Lucas used when he was making Star Wars originally. The Western, the samurai, the crime stuff, the underworld stuff, it's all there in the original Star Wars. And what this show is doing for us is it's expanding that out so that we get to see it in a way we never have in Star Wars before. And it works so well.
Yeah. Guys, we want to get another call or two in before we wrap it up, but there was a question that was posed on the chat a little bit ago, and I thought it was worth discussing. And that is, it looks like we're getting a picture painted of two different Mandos. We have a Mando who was running around with Ran and this Xi'an babe, and it was a very different person. Not a person that would have really gone out on a limb to try to save the life of our pal Matt Lanter, Davin. But, he is so opposed to the needless, execution of Davin. I mean, he's trying everything that he can to reason with him, reason with his cohorts. And I know it's all speculation, but what do you make of the two different Mandos? Why would he all of a sudden now have this sort of Batman-esque no-kill sort of code?
Well, they went into this thing assuming there were going to be no humans or living individuals, flesh and blood. They thought it was going to be completely populated by New Republic prison security droids. So that's one element that came into play that threw the Mando off. And his protection of the innocent is something that I find to be consistent with the Mandalorian thus far as we've met him. Now, he does work in the underworld and has to deal with all of the elements and challenges and nefarious deeds that must be done. And when they were having their Reservoir Dogs moment there, trying to talk about what to do with poor Matt Lanter, Davin Lanter is his actual canon name, Davin Lanter. And that's going to be Matt's canon name in real life too, buddy. So good old Davin. He was... they were negotiating over him. It was Reservoir Dogs, wasn't it, guys? I mean, they're all pointing.
Yeah, they all have their guns pointed at each other.
But he was just, caught in the wrong place at the wrong time, and the Mandalorian acknowledges that. Have we seen anything in his character that makes him cold-blooded? Now, of course, what Xian says about him is that he enjoys target practice. He almost seemed to relish a certain situation where something very heavy needed to be done. Something extremely heavy had to happen. Remember, she references this when they're testing him there in the hold of the Razor Crest.
Rand mentioned something. Rand mentions the first one. He's the one that said, "Remember what you called it? Target practice." Yeah. And then Xian, she mentioned another situation where he apparently single-handedly handled a bunch of stuff. And his statement to Rand was, that was a long time ago.
Yes, right.
Or something along those lines. And so I think that you have someone who's matured as he stepped into kind of what I guess maybe there's a code to the Mandalorian. This is the way,
Sure, but he has lived with the Mandalorian since he was a child.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to find out when this evolution of his character, his honor, might have come about and how it came about. I think that's something
could just be the mere exposure to Baby Yoda, who may be very anchored in the light side of the Force. Maybe there's just some resonant quality about being within the same area as this potentially very special individual. I mean, maybe it has had an effect on the Mandalorian on a level that he can't even really understand. He's not the type of guy who calls you up in the middle of the night and says, I'm just going through this whole pint of ice cream and really just want to talk to someone right now about some hang-ups I have. The Mandalorian is not that guy.
Well, now I'm the kind of guy that'll go through a whole pint of ice cream in a night. Don't you worry about that.
And I am too, my friends. Jerry Garcia, serve it up.
The thing is, when you go to Chapter 3, The Sin, we see the Mandalorian make a choice in that episode. He dropped off Baby Yoda with Werner Herzog and the weird cloney Dr. Man and right. and the stormtroopers and everything.
Yeah.
And he goes back to rescue the child because he realizes he's done something. He recognizes there's something special, not just about the child because of what he did with the muddy rhinoceros, but because of what there is. There's something. I think he recognizes the uniqueness of this child, and so I think this has sparked some level of honor in him for sure. But I think it was there already. You go to our first interaction with him at the beginning of the very first episode when he's got that dude who's talking his ear off, and he was just going to let the guy sit in the back seat and talk his ear off the whole time until the guy tried to escape. And then it's carbonite for you, pal.
Yeah.
I think he does have a certain sense of honor about himself and has for some time. And now so stepping back into this, what we see is someone running up into their old life, having completely changed from what they used to be.
Well, and I definitely like the idea that, yeah, I mean, Jim could be onto something where it's being around something that's emanating such positivity in the light side of the Force. Yes, for sure. But it also could just be the fact that we know that he's seeing a part of himself, a side of himself in this abandoned child. He's thinking, where would he be if someone hadn't taken him in? And, the quickest way to change someone's behavior is to change their role in their life. And when you become a father or a mother or a brother or whatever for the first time, it does have an impact on you.
Absolutely.
And it can happen quickly, too. So it's just fun to think about, but we're definitely seeing a tale of two different Mandos.
Even if you are a pet owner, and that came up in this episode, the responsibility of a living being is something that
sort
requires it's something that requires a particular individual trait that I would find to be very uncommon around something like a bounty hunter or a mercenary. And that's why Mayfair, I believe that was Bill Burr's character, was his Mayfair?
Mayfeld.
I believe Mayfeld was really shining the spotlight on that. How uncommon it would be for the mercenary to have a toddler or a young child like that, or a pet for that matter. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's you have to have this certain element within your heart that opens yourself up to be able to take care of something that might be, weak and requires nurturing. And I mean, even planting a seed, requires some of that love. And for a mercenary or a bounty hunter or even a Mandalorian to experience love in that kind of way, in the Star Wars universe as we're seeing it post-Empire like this, is probably very uncommon.
Yeah,
we're probably dealing with the most cynical of times on the Star Wars timeline among normal people. And I think that Bill Burr represents sort of the normal person outlook.
Absolutely, yes.
Despite the fact he is, such a bad guy, because he is a bad guy.
Right.
But he represents probably a common attitude among the galaxy about things like even planting a seed. People lack that tender touch in the post-Empire Star Wars era, I think. And the Mandalorian is displaying it by protecting and nurturing Baby Yoda.
Well, that's another thing we got in this episode that hasn't really been touched on, is we saw Baby Yoda have some agency of his own as he was avoiding the droid. I feel like Zero actually kind of interpreted what was going on from the message that he had, snooped around and got from old Apollo Creed. And and he realized this is the quarry, this is a bounty. And so he's going to go for the bounty on the little Baby Yoda. And it was just interesting to me to see Baby Yoda, disappear and hide behind things and, and everything. And then you get that great moment that I already mentioned where he has his little hand up and he's going to use the Force, and Mando blows up Zero from behind, and he looks at his hand like, what in the world? But we saw him, we saw this little thing with some of its own agency as far as it, I think up until this point, we've kind of seen him as a pet. Even with the little kids on the planet where we met Cara Dune, they were kind of playing with him like a little pet kind of thing. I'm sitting there thinking, this is a sentient being. He's not, he's a child in I guess like you guys, like these children are children, but I almost said childs. but he does have his agency, and I think that what we saw tonight, or what we saw in this episode, really helped kind of put that on display, that we're not dealing with a little baby that is helpless and stupid, but he does have some agency about him, and that was kind of a neat thing to see, because it's the first time we've actually seen it truly since that second episode.
Yeah. All right, one more call. What would a episode of the Rebel Force Radio Mandalorian After Show be without Eric from Phoenix?
Eric from Phoenix.
Checking in. So, Eric, welcome back to the show, my friend.
Hey, guys. How's it going?
All right. What do you think? Chapter 6.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I absolutely loved it. This show is basically a visual comic book. You know, if you think back to the Marvel comics, and that's what they've really given us. I mean, I've enjoyed every episode. I've seen some people in chat tonight didn't really like this episode. My wife, this wasn't her favorite episode. We did freak the dog out when we all yelled out loud when we saw Dave Filoni. He might have just recovered.
You know what it reminded me of? Do you remember when one of the last times we actually saw Dave was at Star Wars Celebration in, I think it might have been Orlando, when they had that X-Wing experience ride? Jim, do you remember that?
Too.
And
that was the last time we saw Filoni was at the Rogue One premiere.
Oh, that's right, Rogue One premiere.
That's when Lucasfilm discovered they were they were done with the build you up process, and now they wanted to work on the knock you down process. But you were with Dave when you were taking that ride. Experience. Yeah. You weren't there because you disappeared for some reason.
Yeah.
And that's when Filoni coined the phrase, you know, nothing really cool happens unless Swank isn't here. And that's when we got pulled into the this incredible virtual reality situation. I want to say it was Electronic Arts who had this pavilion at Star Wars Celebration 2015. And I was hanging out with Filoni, and they pulled us into this this area where they put X-Wing pilot costumes on us and helmets, and then we actually sat in cockpits, and they shot footage of us flying through what looked like Beggar's Canyon back home. It was amazing. I had a ball doing it. You can see some footage of that on the Rebel Force Radio YouTube channel. Our buddy Chris Amarim made it into a video that actually placed me into the action of the Battle of Scarif from Rogue One. You can see that on right here at our YouTube channel. But Filoni was with me, and he did it as well. And I remember looking at Dave's video, and Dave was taking it much more serious than I was. I had a you-know-what eating grin on my face the whole time it was happening.
I remember we were teasing Dave because he was like hitting all the buttons in the ship.
He told me, he said he would reach up and flip the switch. And he's like, yeah, they always do that, you know. And I was like, but there's nothing up there. He's like, yeah, sure. There's I reached up and did, and I'm like, that looks so cool. So I was expecting him to do it in the X-Wing cockpit on this episode to reach up and flip those imaginary switches, whatever they are. Han Solo is the guy who's probably the biggest culprit of making that move in the Star Wars universe. He's always reaching up and flipping a switch. But Dave was doing that, and I thought it looked cool as hell. And so there you have it. He has experience in an X-Wing cockpit, and maybe I can dig up that video somewhere.
I was looking for it here while you were talking, and I just can't put
they gave us
my hands on it.
They were on private links on YouTube.
Right.
So you have to have the link to access the video. And Dave gave me the link back in the day, but that was like 4.5 years ago. So I might have it around. If I could dig it up, I'll put it out there.
It looks pretty damn close to what we saw in Mandalorian tonight.
I know. So when he showed up at the end, a caller brought up earlier, does it take you out of it or anything? But I mean, I guess it does to a degree, but it did nothing to diminish the moment of the scene and the beauty of the plan the Mandalorian had by planting the tracker on Quinn and then flying out right at that moment. He knows that they're going to send. He knows because the Mandalorian has a history with Ran. He knows Ran is packing that gunship underneath the deck and is probably going to send it after him once he leaves because he wiped out Ran's crew on the mission and did so unapologetically. And while I still think Ran might have actually been relieved that the Mandalorian had offed some of those individuals, still, he's not going to let the Mandalorian just walk away from it all, even though he did pay him. So he's going to blow him up. In the way the Mando planned it, and then to see the X-Wings post Return of the Jedi, X-Wings return in the Star Wars universe, being flown by three of the future minds of present to future minds of the saga, is a great tribute. Filoni, Chow, and Fumu Yiwa.
Sorry, I was looking.
Struggle.
I was like,
it is a struggle with Rick's name, and I'm embarrassed.
Famu Yiwa.
I am a fan of his, man, and I'm going to seek out his previous work because his two contributions to season 1 of The Mandalorian have been outstanding, and I love every minute. Action
both of them.
Don't you think so, Eric from Phoenix?
100% agree. 100%.
Yes.
They've been great.
Yes, and these are the people, the individuals we might see helming future Star Wars films when they finally get that act together.
Yeah, maybe they should have started here.
Well,
maybe they should have let this be their testing ground.
Let me tell you something. In my experience of watching the world go round, you don't ever want when you are segueing into a success story where the founder or the originator is stepping down, a great leader is leaving his position. You never want to be the replacement. You always want to be the replacement of the replacement because that's when it all comes together. Transition periods are never easy. Mm-hmm. No one said George Lucas walking away from Star Wars was going to be easy. No one said that. And I always imagined that we would go through lots of growing pains.
Well, there were a lot of fans that after the prequels couldn't get George far away enough from Star Wars fast enough, and they just couldn't wait to have somebody else take the reins. Not so easy, is it?
I really think that George vindicated himself with the Clone Wars to a massive degree. I'm sure there were missteps along the ways in that series as well. But meanwhile, he was cultivating and training his eventual successor, which I really hope will be a guy like Dave Filoni, who, much like George, is very much into what he does and very much pure about his craft. And so I really hope that we are seeing the launching pad for future Star Wars really taking hold here in The Mandalorian Season 1 because, wow, am I on board.
Eric, anything else before we wrap things up tonight?
Yeah, just the last thing I had is just the classic 80s horror kind of reference, I thought, with the Mandalorian chasing Mayfield at the end, where you kind of see him and the lights flicker out.
Yes.
And you don't see him. It's kind of like, to me,
that was kind of a nightmare a Nightmare on Elm Street kind of vibe.
Freddy
Totally.
Jason.
Yes.
And then the music they were playing during that, if you go back and watch it, it's kind of the 80s. I can't. Yeah, right. And it also reminded me of Stranger Things. So that whole sequence I thought was hilarious because it was tense, and I wanted the Mandalorian to get him, but it was kind of. My daughter was sitting next to me. She goes, "Dad, that was kind of creepy."
Yeah,
so,
it was.
It
was creepy. I tell you,
it was beautiful.
I have not been. You mentioned sitting there with your daughter. I'm watching this show every week with my 7-year-old son and my 11-year-old daughter, and this is because as a Star Wars fan or a fan of anything, and you want to introduce your kids to it, you want them to have the same kind of reaction that you had, and nothing that I have shown them has come close to what I'm seeing with The Mandalorian. I mean, they are on the edge of their seats. They're asking me about it, By Wednesday, they're asking me, well, when is it coming out? It's coming out Friday. It comes out Friday. We'll see it Friday.
But next Wednesday, it'll be out that
yes.
day,
Yeah. So next week's going to be a big week. But, I mean, I look at my son and, he sits there, eyes as big as saucers the whole time. And then as soon as it's over, he's grabbing his Nerf guns and he's running around and he's the Mandalorian. And it is just, it's such a blast. It's such a blast.
For walks, I'm the Mandalorian and he's Baby Yoda. I need to take the Nerf gun with me next time.
That's
that will get the people in the neighborhood talking.
So it's awesome. And it's also awesome talking to you, Eric. Thank you so much for calling in. Thank you, everybody, for calling in. Thank you, Steve Glossen, for hanging with us this week and breaking down
Thank you so much for having
6.
me. It's been a blast.
Well, we might have to do a sort of a greatest hit once we wrap up this season, and we can go back and we can look at all of it in the context of having it all unfold. But if you want to hear more from Steve, you can go to Steve's website. It is geekoutpodcast.com. That's sort of the key to the whole Geek Out Loud universe, the Gulliverse, where Steve is sort of the He-Man of the Gulliverse.
The truth is...
he has the power.
Yeah, the truth is the Gulliverse had a bit of... I know you remember Crisis on Infinite Earths, where all the universes were smashed into one. We kind of had that. And so it's just Geek Out Loud and Big Honkin' Show anymore, pretty much. So
all right,
we're trying to have fun and get things doing, but it's still a Gulliverse in our hearts. It's like...
Get the lead out, Steve. Get the lead out.
We need to, Jimmy Mac.
We're only at Zeppelin 3. Come on.
I know.
We got to get the lead out. So, hey, thank you so much for everyone for listening. Chris Fisher, thank you for your kind donation there in the YouTube chat. Chris is looking for some Game of Thrones in Star Wars, but loves the throwback episodic feel of The Mandalorian. Finds it to be refreshing and tells Dave Filoni, Jon Favreau, and the gang to keep up the work. And I totally agree. Let Star Wars breathe a little bit. Let's all come to the realization. This is not Marvel. This is not Game of Thrones, but this is Star Wars. And something that made Star Wars work so well, I think, is the beautiful stories it told in the on time and then in the off time, all the conversations that it generated. In a positive fashion, too, that was focused on the mythology and not bogged down by real-world agendas and what have you. Let's go back to that beautiful day of storytelling when we were kids, circa 1979. We couldn't wait for The Empire Strikes Back and the conversations we used to have out there on the playgrounds of America and worldwide. That's what The Mandalorian sparks within me. And that, to me, is what Star Wars is all about.
Big week coming up. Next week, we've got Mandalorian on Wednesday, followed by Thursday and the official release of The Rise of Skywalker Episode 9. And then on Friday the 20th, you can join Jimmy Mack and myself, along with Billy Mack, live in Cleveland at Playhouse Square's Kennedy's Cabaret Theater. We'll be doing a live Rebel Force Radio show where we give you our take on what we've seen in Episode 9. And we'll be taking comments and questions from the audience. It's going to be a great time. So a few tickets still remain at playhousesquare.org, and just do a search for Rebel Force Radio or Skywalker Rises in Ohio, and you'll get all the details there. And we hope to see you in Cleveland in just a few days. That's going to do it for us. We'll be back next week with our look at Chapter 7. Make sure that you're subscribed to the podcast. Go to rebelforceradio.com for all the details there. You can find us in iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, anywhere you can find podcasts. You'll find us here at Rebel Force Radio, and that does include, yes, the Mandalorian After Show, as well as the weekly Rebel Force Radio flagship podcast. That's going to do it for us. We'll see you next time for Rebel Force Radio. I'm Jason.
And I'm Jimmy Mack. And, of course, our special guest.
I'm Steve Glossen.
And remember,
the Force will be with you, always.
I have spoken.
Oh, we'll throw one of those in there. Why not?
I have spoken.
Thanks, Nick.